Admiral looked at the holographic display floating above his command table. The blue light showed a small yellow star with several planets orbiting around it. Nothing special. Nothing that should concern the mighty hegemony. "Report," he said to his intelligence officer. Commander stepped forward, her scaled hands dancing over her data pad. "The system designation is Sol. Third planet shows signs of recent industrialization. The species calls themselves humans. They achieved basic space flight only 200 of their years ago." Four eyes blinked slowly. 200 years was nothing. His own species had been traveling between stars for over 10,000 years. Military strength. Primitive fusion drives, kinetic weapons, some basic energy shields around there. Paused. "Our scouts counted maybe 50 ships total in the entire system. Most are cargo vessels." The Admiral's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his kind. 50 ships. The hegemony had conquered star systems with thousands of warships for breakfast. This would be easier than taking resources from the trading posts. "Mineral wealth?" he asked. "Significant. Rare earth elements, platinum group metals, and something our scientists find very interesting. Brought up new data. They have large amounts of a heavy element we've never seen before. It appears to be incredibly dense and energy-rich." Interest sharpened. New elements meant new technologies. New technologies meant power. And power meant everything in a galaxy where 12 different species competed for resources. "Standard pacification protocol," he decided. "Send 30 ships, more than enough to convince them to surrender." The bridge crew began working immediately. 30 ships would launch within the hour. The humans would see the overwhelming force, realize they had no chance, and surrender. It always worked this way. Every species understood basic mathematics. 3 weeks later, the hegemony fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical displays come online. "Sensors are active," reported his navigation officer. "We're detecting the human, third planet from the star. Population approximately 8 billion. 8 billion. That was actually quite impressive for such a young spacefaring race. Most species barely managed 2 billion by the time they left their home systems." "Any response to our arrival?" asked. "Yes, sir. We're receiving a transmission." The main screen flickered to life. A human appeared, bipedal, mammalian, with dark skin and short gray fur covering only the top of its head. It wore what appeared to be a military uniform. "This is Admiral of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said in surprisingly clear galactic common language. "You have entered sovereign human space. Turn back now or face the consequences." The bridge fell silent, felt his secondary heart skip a beat. Then he began laughing. The sound echoed through the command center like breaking glass. "Did this creature just threaten us?" he asked his crew. Commander checked her readings again. "Sir, their largest ship is maybe 1/10 the size of our smallest escort vessel. Their weapons are—" she paused. "Sir, I don't think their weapons can even penetrate our navigation shields." Composed himself and activated the return transmission. "Human Admiral, I am Admiral of the hegemony. You will surrender your system within 1 rotation of your planet, or we will take it by force. This is your only warning." The human's expression didn't change. If anything, Admiral looked sad. "We tried to warn you." The transmission ended. "Sir," said carefully, "that was an unusual response. Most species either surrender immediately or make threats about their powerful defenses. This human seemed almost regretful. Waved a dismissive claw. Probably some primitive cultural response. Begin standard approach. Keep weapons charged but don't target anything yet. Let them see our firepower and come to their senses." The hegemony fleet moved deeper into the system. As they passed the outer planets, noticed something odd. There was a lot of traffic between the planets. Not just around, though, but everywhere. Ships moved between the asteroid belt and the fourth planet. Mining stations orbited the gas giants. For a species only 200 years into space travel, they had been very busy. Admiral, his tactical officer, called out, "We're detecting movement near the asteroid belt. Multiple contacts." "Human warships?" "Appear to be, sir. 12 vessels moving to intercept our course." 12 ships against 30. The humans were either very brave or very stupid, probably stupid. "Signal the fleet. Battle formation. Let's show them what real military power looks like." The hegemony ships spread out in their traditional attack pattern. Each vessel was over a kilometer long, armed with plasma cannons that could melt mountains, and protected by energy shields that had never been breached in 3,000 years of warfare. The human ships looked like insects by comparison. Small, crude, with visible mechanical joints and what appeared to be chemical rocket engines. Their largest ship was maybe 300 meters long. "Sir, receiving another transmission from the humans," the communications officer announced. Admiral appeared on screen again. Behind him could see what looked like a busy command center. Humans moved quickly between stations, their voices creating a background hum of activity. Admiral said, "This is your final chance. Withdraw from our system. We don't want to fight, but we will if we must." Human replied, "Look at your screens. Look at our ships. Look at your ships. Do the mathematics. Surrender now, and your people will live as valued workers in the hegemony. Continue this foolishness, and we will be forced to demonstrate why 47 star systems have joined us voluntarily." Admiral was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. 47 systems, you said." 47. "And they all surrendered when they saw your ships." "All of them, because they understood reality." Nodded slowly. "I see. Admiral, let me ask you something. In all those encounters, in all those systems, did you ever fight someone who had evolved on a planet where everything wanted to kill them? Where ice ages came every few thousand years? Where supervolcanoes could end civilizations? Where asteroid impacts, solar flares, and plague outbreaks were just Tuesday?" Felt a strange chill run through his exoskeleton. "What is your point, human?" "My point," said, "is that you just declared war on a species that considers extinction-level events to be learning experiences. We've been preparing for something like you our entire history. The only question is whether you'll be smart enough to learn from what happens next." The transmission ended. On the tactical display, the 12 human ships began accelerating toward the hegemony fleet. They were moving fast, much faster than ships that size should be able to move. "All ships," ordered, "prepare to fire. Let's end this quickly." He had no idea that he had just made the worst decision in galactic history. The battle began exactly as Admiral expected. The 12 human ships charged straight at his fleet with no strategy, no formation, no apparent plan except to die gloriously. It was almost sad. "Target the lead vessel," he ordered. "One plasma burst should be enough to vaporize it. Let's show them what they're facing." The Eternal Dominion's main cannon charged with a sound like thunder. Energy readings spiked across the bridge displays. Then the weapon fired. The plasma bolt streaked across space, bright enough to blind unprotected eyes. It struck the lead human ship dead center. For a moment, smiled. The demonstration would end this foolish resistance. But the human ship didn't vaporize. The plasma bolt hit some kind of hull plating and scattered in dozens of directions. The ship kept coming. "What?" stared at his tactical display. "How is that possible?" "Sir," his weapons officer said, voice shaking, "the hull appears to be made of some kind of layered ceramic composite. The plasma dispersed instead of penetrating." "Then use the secondary batteries. Pound them with everything." Dozens of plasma bolts reached out from the hegemony fleet. The human ships took hit after hit. Their hulls glowed red-hot. Pieces of armor flew off into space. but they kept coming. And now could see something that made his blood turn cold. The human ships weren't trying to fight back. They weren't firing weapons. They were just accelerating, getting faster and faster. "Sir," the navigation officer called out, "the humans are moving at significant fractions of light speed. If they maintain this course, they're going to ram us," whispered. It was insane, completely insane. No species used ramming attacks in space warfare. The mathematics didn't work. You lost your ship and crew for maybe one enemy vessel. It was economically impossible, strategically worthless, tactically ridiculous. "Emergency maneuvers," he shouted. "All ships evasive action." But it was too late. The human ships had spread out during their charge. Each one was aimed at a different hegemony vessel, and they were moving so fast that changing course was almost impossible. The first impact came at 0.3 light speed. The human destroyer Shanghai hit the hegemony cruiser Pride of Vex amidships. Both ships ceased to exist. The explosion lit up half the solar system. The shockwave knocked 3 other hegemony vessels out of formation. Then the second impact, then the third. Watched in horror as his fleet died. Ship after ship, vaporized by human vessels that turned themselves into kinetic weapons. The humans didn't even try to survive the impacts. They aimed for the most critical parts of his ships and hit them at velocities that guaranteed mutual destruction. In 8 minutes, 12 human ships destroyed 15 hegemony vessels and crippled 6 more. "Retreat," screamed. "All ships, emergency jump, get us out of here." The surviving hegemony ships fled toward the edge of the system, their faster-than-light drives charging desperately. Behind them, debris clouds marked the graves of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, destroyed by primitive human vessels using tactics that shouldn't work. As his flagship reached minimum safe distance for a jump, his communications officer looked up from her station with wide, terrified eyes. "Sir, we're receiving broadcasts from the human, multiple frequencies. They're talking to each other about the battle." "Put it on speakers." The bridge filled with human voices speaking in their strange, quick language. His universal translator struggled to keep up. "Destroyer Squadron 12 achieved optimal impact solutions on targets Alpha through Golf. Confirmed kills on 11 enemy vessels. Recommend advancing timeline for Phase 2 operations." Captain and crew of the Mumbai showed excellent form on their final approach. Textbook execution. New impact velocity calculations suggest we can increase effectiveness by 8% if we modify hull composition. Felt his legs give out. He collapsed into his command chair as the terrible truth hit him. The humans weren't treating the ramming attacks as desperate last stands. They were discussing them like standard military operations, with technical improvements and performance reviews. "They planned this," he whispered. Commander was staring at the tactical display, where computer models showed the battle from multiple angles. "Sir, look at their approach vectors. Each ship targeted the optimal impact point for maximum damage. They calculated the exact velocity needed to penetrate our shields. This wasn't brave stupidity. This was precision engineering." More human transmissions filled the bridge. "Earth command to all stations. Enemy fleet retreating as predicted. Begin Phase 2 construction immediately. Luna shipyards report new vessels will be ready within 72 hours, incorporating lessons learned from first engagement. Asteroid mining operations report significant acceleration in resource extraction. Military production increasing by 400%. His 4 hearts were beating so fast he thought they might burst. 400% in 3 days. "Sir," his intelligence officer said quietly, "I think we may have made an error in our initial assessment." The admiral looked at the human growing smaller on his screens. "Get me a communication line to High Command, immediately." "Yes, sir, what should I tell them?" Thought about the 12 human ships that had just destroyed half his fleet using tactics no sane species would ever consider. He thought about the casual way they discussed throwing away their lives and ships. He thought about the 400% increase in military production. "Tell them," he said slowly, "that we're going to need more ships, a lot more ships." The call went through to the Hegemony High Command 3 hours later. Found himself facing the War Council, 12 of the most experienced military leaders in the galaxy. They listened to his report in growing disbelief. "Admiral," said Supreme Commander, his voice heavy with skepticism, "you're telling us that a primitive species used suicide attacks to defeat your fleet." "Not suicide attacks," corrected. "Ramming attacks. There's a difference. They calculated everything: impact velocity, target selection, damage potential. They turned physics into a weapon." "Impossible. No species would throw away trained crews like that." "These humans apparently do, and from their communications it's standard doctrine." The War Council exchanged glances. Supreme Commander leaned forward. "Admiral, how many ships would you estimate you need to pacify this system?" Thought about the human voices discussing 400% production increases. He thought about their casual attitude toward death. He thought about 12 ships destroying 15 of his best vessels. "Sir," he said, "I don't think 50 ships will be enough." "How many do you need?" "All of them." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Supreme Commander spoke. "Explain." "Sir, these humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanoes, asteroids, plagues, they survived it all. They're not like other species. They don't fear death. They weaponize it. You're requesting the entire Hegemony fleet for one primitive system." "I'm requesting it because I think we may have just declared war on something we don't understand. Something that might actually be able to fight back." Supreme Commander was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. "Very well, Admiral. You'll have 200 ships, but if you're wrong about this threat." "Sir," said, watching the human system disappear as his ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, "I really hope I am wrong. Because if I'm right, we just woke up something that should have been left sleeping." 3 weeks later, Admiral returned to the Sol system with 200 ships. It was the largest fleet the Hegemony had ever assembled for a single operation. Enough firepower to turn a planet into molten glass. Enough ships to blockade an entire star system. It should have been overwhelming. It should have ended the war before it really began. But as the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, knew something was wrong. His sensors officer was staring at her displays with an expression of pure disbelief. "Reports," he ordered. "Sir, I'm detecting massive industrial activity throughout the system. The asteroid belt appears to have been reorganized." "What do you mean, reorganized?" The main screen flickered to life, showing long-range scans of the space between Mars and Jupiter. What saw made his blood turn cold. The asteroid belt was gone. In its place was a ring of massive industrial stations, hundreds of them, each one the size of a small moon, connected by streams of cargo ships carrying raw materials back and forth. The entire area glowed with the light of countless fusion reactors and manufacturing facilities. "How long have we been gone?" he asked. 3 weeks and 2 days, sir." "They built all of this in 3 weeks." His intelligence officer commander was running calculations on her console. "Sir, this level of construction would take most species decades, centuries for some. The energy requirements alone." "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the third planet." Admiral appeared on the main screen again. He looked older, more tired. Behind him could see what looked like a massive command center with hundreds of humans working at stations that covered every available surface. Admiral said, "You came back, I was hoping you wouldn't." Human, surrender now and your people will be treated fairly. Continue this resistance and we will be forced to destroy your. Shook his head slowly. Admiral, may I ask you something? Do you have a family? The question caught off guard. What does that matter? Children, a mate, people who depend on you coming home safely. Yes. So do my people, every single one of them. And when you showed up 3 weeks ago and started shooting at our ships, they all understood what that meant. They understood that someone had decided their children shouldn't have a future. Paused, and when he continued, his voice was harder. Admiral, you made 2 mistakes. First, you assumed that because we're new to space, we're not dangerous. Second, you assumed that because your previous wars were easy, this one would be too. We have 200 ships, said. Your entire species has maybe 50. Had 50 3 weeks ago. Smile was cold. Admiral, let me ask you another question. How long do you think it takes us to build a warship? Before could answer, his tactical officer screamed. Sir, multiple contacts approaching from the inner system, hundreds of them. The long-range sensors came online and felt the universe shift around him. Approaching from the direction of Earth and Mars was the largest fleet he had ever seen. Not hundreds of ships, thousands. The new human vessels were larger than the ones from the first battle, sleeker, more heavily armed, and they were moving in perfect formation, like they had been training together for years instead of weeks. Impossible, he whispered. Sir, said her voice shaking, I'm detecting over 3,000 human warships, various classes. Some appear to be as large as our dreadnoughts. Admiral was still on the screen, watching's face with something that might have been pity. You want to know how we built them so fast? It's simple. We turned our entire civilization into a weapons factory. Every mining station, every manufacturing facility, every research lab. Everything. When someone threatens to destroy you discover you can work much faster than you thought possible. This is impossible, said. No species can mobilize resources this quickly. Most species can't, agreed. But most species never had to survive ice ages, asteroid impacts, and supervolcanoes. Most species didn't evolve on a planet that taught them how to work together when facing extinction. And most species never had to fight wars where losing meant their entire civilization disappeared. The human fleet was getting closer. Could see individual ship classifications now. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and things his computers couldn't identify. All of them were accelerating toward his position. Sir, his weapons officer said, recommend we begin firing at maximum range. With our superior technology, we might be able to thin their numbers before they close to ramming distance. Ramming distance, laughed bitterly. Look at those ships, they're not built for ramming, they're built for fighting. He was right. Unlike the crude vessels from the first battle, these new human ships bristled with weapons. Energy cannons, missile launchers, and things that looked disturbingly familiar. Are those our weapons? He asked. Was scanning the approaching fleet with growing alarm. Sir, the humans appear to have reverse-engineered our plasma cannon technology. They've also improved it. Their energy outputs are 20% higher than our current models. They captured our technology from destroyed ships. No, sir. They captured it from our weapons fire. Somehow they analyzed the plasma bolts we fired at them and figured out how to build the cannons. Stared at the approaching fleet. 3,000 ships built in 3 weeks. Captured technology, reverse-engineered and improved in the same time frame. Industrial capacity that could reorganize an entire asteroid belt. What kind of species are we fighting? He whispered. Admiral heard him through the open communication channel. The kind that spent 4 billion years learning how to survive on a planet that kept trying to kill us. The kind that had to develop technology fast or go extinct. The kind that learned to work together because the alternative was death. Paused and his expression grew sad again. Admiral, I'm going to make this offer one more time. Withdraw from our system, take your ships and leave. Tell your people that humans are not to be disturbed. Do this and no one else has to die today. And if I refuse, then you'll learn why we don't fight wars to win territory or resources. We fight wars to make sure that anyone who threatens our families regrets it so much they never try again. Looked at his 200 ships, then at the 3,000 human vessels approaching his position. He thought about his family back home. He thought about the 47 star systems that had surrendered rather than fight. He thought about the 12 human ships that had destroyed half his fleet by turning themselves into weapons. All ships, he ordered, prepare to engage the enemy. It was the second worst decision he had ever made. The battle began when the human fleet opened fire at a range that should have been impossible for their technology. Plasma bolts and energy beams reached across space with precision that physics. The first salvo destroyed 8 hegemony ships before they could return fire. As the admiral watched his fleet begin to die, he realized something terrible. The humans had been studying him. They knew exactly how his ships moved, how his weapons worked, how his tactics functioned. This wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. A demonstration of what happened when you picked a fight with a species that had been preparing for war since before they left there. 6 months after first contact, Supreme Commander stood in what remained of the Hegemony High Command Center. Half the building had been destroyed by human orbital bombardment 2 weeks ago. The other half was held together by emergency force fields and desperate hope. "Report," he said to the few staff officers still alive. Colonel looked up from her data pad. Her scales had lost their color from stress and malnutrition. "Sir, we've lost contact with another 14 star systems in the past week. The humans have taken complete control of the Outer Rim territories." "How is that possible? It's been 6 months. 6 months since they barely had 50 ships." "Sir, our intelligence suggests they now have over 50,000 active warships. Their industrial capacity appears to be—" She paused, struggling with the numbers. "Sir, they're building ships faster than we can count them." Turned to the strategic display that dominated the center of the room. Red indicators showed human fleet positions throughout what used to be hegemony space. There were so many red dots that some areas of the map looked solid crimson. How did they move so fast? How did they coordinate attacks across 17 star systems simultaneously? "We think they've been preparing for this war much longer than we realized," said Intelligence Director Al, his voice heavy with defeat. "Sir, we've discovered something disturbing. Hidden observation posts throughout hegemony space. Some of them are decades old." "Decades, but they only achieved space flight 200 years ago. Apparently they've been watching us for most of that time, learning our languages, mapping our trade routes, identifying our military bases. What we thought was first contact was actually the end of the longest intelligence operation in galactic history." Felt his secondary heart skip a beat. They were spying on us. "Not just spying, sir. They were learning everything about us. Our tactics, our technology, our culture, our psychology. When the shooting started, they already knew exactly how we would respond to every situation." The Supreme Commander looked at the tactical display again. Human fleets were attacking hegemony positions using perfect knowledge of their defensive capabilities. They struck supply depots, communication relays, and command centers with surgical precision. Meanwhile, hegemony forces stumbled through space fighting an enemy they knew nothing about. "Sir," Colonel continued, "there's something else. Intercepted human communications suggest they're not actually trying to conquer our territory." "What do you mean?" "They're not occupying worlds or enslaving populations. They're doing something else, something we've never seen before." Director Al brought up new intelligence reports. "Sir, every world the humans liberate receives the same offer. Join something called the Human Commonwealth voluntarily and receive advanced technology, mutual defense agreements, and free trade partnerships. And if they refuse? Nothing, sir, the humans just leave, but Al hesitated. Sir, no world has refused. Stared at the intelligence officer. None of them. Sir, the humans are offering technologies we've never seen. Medical advances that can extend life by centuries. Industrial techniques that can feed entire populations with minimal resources. Energy systems that make our fusion reactors look like campfires. Where did they get this technology? We think they developed it themselves. Sir, human scientists have been working on these problems for decades. When they decided to go to war, they apparently opened their research files and shared everything with their military. The Supreme Commander felt the universe spinning around him. Are you telling me that this primitive species has been hiding advanced technology from us? Not hiding, sir. Developing. While we've been using the same basic technologies for thousands of years, the humans have been innovating constantly. They've only been in space for 200 years, but they've made more scientific advances in that time than most species make in. A new alarm began sounding throughout the command center. Colonel rushed to her console, her claws dancing over the controls. Sir, we're receiving reports from the core worlds. Human fleets have appeared in the system, and her voice caught. Sir, they're in the home system. Our home system? How did they get past our defenses? Sir, they didn't attack our defenses. They bypassed them entirely. Their ships appear to be using some kind of advanced, faster-than-light drive that can jump directly into a system without using the normal approach routes. Closed his eyes. The hegemony had spent 3,000 years building an empire based on controlling faster-than-light travel routes. Every species they conquered had been forced to use the same basic hyperspace technology, which meant their movements could be predicted and controlled. But if the humans had developed their own FTL technology? Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet in our home system. The main screen flickered to life. Admiral appeared, but he looked different now. Older, more tired, but also more confident. Behind him could see what looked like the bridge of a ship larger than anything in the hegemony fleet. Supreme Commander said, I believe it's time we talked. Human, your forces are in violation of. Commander interrupted, let's skip the formal protests. You know why I'm here. You know what this is about. The question is whether we can end this war before more people die unnecessarily. You attacked us. No, Commander, you attacked us. You came to our home system with a fleet of warships and demanded our surrender. We defended ourselves. Everything that happened after that was your choice. Paused, and his expression grew sad. Commander, we never wanted this war. We tried to warn your admiral that attacking us was a mistake. We gave him multiple chances to leave peacefully, but you wouldn't listen. We are the hegemony. We have ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years. And that's exactly the problem, said quietly. You've ruled for so long that you forgot there might be someone you can't defeat. You became so used to easy victories that you couldn't recognize a real threat when you saw one. Leaned forward, and when he spoke again, his voice was harder. Commander, let me explain something to you. Every species you conquered in the past 3,000 years surrendered because fighting you wasn't worth the cost. They could live under hegemony rule and still have decent lives. But we're different. We're from a world that taught us that sometimes you have to fight even when the odds are impossible. We learned that sometimes surrender isn't an option because the alternative is extinction. And we learned that when someone threatens your family, you don't negotiate. You make sure they can never threaten anyone ever again. The Supreme Commander looked around his ruined command center. What do you want? I want you to understand what you're fighting. This isn't a war between two governments. This is a war between a species that thinks conquest is normal and a species that thinks extinction-level threats are Tuesday. You can't defeat the entire hegemony. Smile was cold. Commander, we already have. We've taken control of your supply lines, destroyed your fleet, and offered every world in your empire a better deal than you ever gave them. What you're seeing isn't the beginning of a war. It's the end of your empire. But we're not conquerors. We're not interested in ruling other species. We're interested in making sure that no one ever again makes the mistake of threatening human civilians. Paused, and his voice became almost gentle. Commander, this war can end today. All you have to do is sign a simple document acknowledging that the hegemony no longer exists and that all member worlds are free to choose their own futures. And if I refuse, then we'll keep doing what we've been doing for the past 6 months. And in another 6 months, there won't be a hegemony left to surrender. Looked at the tactical display one more time. Red indicators covered 90% of former hegemony space. In 6 months, humans had dismantled an empire that had stood for 3. You're offering us surrender terms. I'm offering you survival terms. There's a difference. The Supreme Commander realized he had no choice left, none at all. 1 year after the first shot was fired, Admiral sat in what used to be called the Hegemony High Command Center. Now it was the headquarters of something called the Human Commonwealth Transition Authority. The walls were still the same color, but everything else had changed. Admiral sat across from him at a simple metal table. Between them was a data pad containing the final surrender documents. The war was over. The hegemony was over. 3,000 years of galactic dominance had ended in 12 months. You know, said quietly, I keep wondering if there was a way this could have gone differently. Looked up from the document he was about to sign. Could it have? If you had listened to our first warning, if you had turned around and left our system alone, shrugged. Maybe, but probably not. Your empire was based on the idea that superior technology and overwhelming force could solve any problem. You would have kept trying until you learned otherwise. And now we have learned. Yes, you have. Read through the surrender terms one more time. They were not what he had expected. No slavery, no tributes, no occupation forces. Instead, the terms offered technological assistance, trade partnerships, and protection under something called the Human Defense Guarantee. I don't understand these terms, he said. You won, we lost. Why aren't you enslaving us? Leaned back in his chair. Admiral, let me ask you something. What do you think humans want? To rule the galaxy, obviously. To replace our empire with your own. Wrong. His voice was firm. We don't want to rule anything. We want to make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. I don't understand. Admiral, when your fleet arrived in our system and demanded our surrender, you weren't just threatening our government or our military. You were threatening our children, our families, our entire way of life. Every human understood that if we lost, everything we cared about would disappear. Paused, and when he continued, his voice was softer. That's not a feeling I want any other species to experience. So we're building something different. A galaxy where no one has to choose between surrender and extinction. Set down the data pad. Admiral, I have to ask you something that has been bothering me since this war began. Your species achieved space flight only 200 years ago. How did you develop such advanced technology so quickly? Smiled. That's actually a really good question. The answer is that we didn't develop it quickly. We developed it desperately. I don't understand the difference. Most species develop technology gradually over thousands of years. They have time to study, to experiment, to make mistakes and learn from them. But humans evolved on a planet that kept trying to kill us. Every few thousand years, something would happen that threatened our entire species. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plague outbreaks. Stood up and walked to the window overlooking what used to be the hegemony capital. We learned very early that the universe doesn't care if you're ready for disaster. It comes anyway. So we developed a culture based on solving impossible problems very quickly. but surely other species faced similar challenges. Not really. Most habitable planets are much more stable than Earth. Most species evolved in environments where gradual adaptation was sufficient for survival. But Earth shook his head. Earth taught us that sometimes you have 6 months to solve a problem that should take decades, or everyone dies. So when we threatened we did what we always do. We treated it as an extinction-level event and mobilized our entire civilization to solve it. Turned back to face. Admiral, did you know that humans have contingency plans for asteroid impacts, eruptions, global pandemics, nuclear wars, alien invasions, and 47 other extinction scenarios? Felt cold, 47. We've been practicing for something like your invasion for over a century. The only thing that surprised us was how unprepared you were for someone who could fight back. Unprepared. Returned to his seat. Admiral, your empire lasted 3,000 years because you never fought anyone who could threaten you. Every species you conquered was either too weak to resist or too smart to try. You built your entire military doctrine around fighting inferior opponents. But we had superior technology. No, you had older technology. There's a difference. Your plasma cannons were mature, reliable, proven designs. But they were also basically the same weapons your species was using 1,000 years ago. You stopped innovating because you didn't need to. Pulled out his own data pad and showed a technical schematic. This is a human plasma cannon designed during the war. It produces 40% more energy output than your best weapons, uses 60% less power, and can be manufactured in 1/4 the time. How is that possible? Because we've been developing new technologies constantly for 200 years. Every time we faced a problem, we invented a solution. While your empire was stagnating, we were innovating. Studied the schematic. The design was elegant, efficient, and completely different from anything in the hegemony archives. Why are you showing me this? Because this is what we're offering every world that joins the Commonwealth. Not just protection, but access to technologies that will improve their lives. Put away the data pad. Admiral, your empire was based on fear. Ours is based on cooperation. And it will work. It's already working. In the past year, over 300 worlds have requested membership in the Commonwealth. Not because we conquered them, but because we offered them something better than what they had before. Gestured to the window. Outside, could see construction crews, human and alien, working side by side, rebuilding the damaged parts of the city with technology that looked decades ahead of anything the hegemony had possessed. Admiral, I want you to understand something important. We didn't fight this war to punish your species. We fought it to make sure that empires like yours can never threaten peaceful civilizations again. And now we build something better. A galaxy where technological advancement is shared, where conflicts are resolved through negotiation instead of conquest, and where every species can develop according to its own nature without fear of extinction. Picked up the data pad and activated the signature function. And if someone refuses to join this Commonwealth, then they're free to go their own way, as long as they don't threaten others. We're not interested in forcing anyone to join us. But if they do threaten others, his expression grew cold. Then they'll learn what we taught the hegemony, that there's a species in this galaxy that considers extinction-level threats to be learning experiences. Signed the surrender document. As his signature appeared on the screen, he realized something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Admiral, he said quietly, what would have happened if we had been stronger, if we had brought 1,000 ships to your system instead of 30? Was quiet for a moment. When he answered, his voice was thoughtful. Admiral, you made the mistake of thinking that the size of your fleet determined your chance of victory. But the real question was never how many ships you brought. The real question was whether you were ready to fight a species that had been preparing for war since before they left there. And we weren't. No, you weren't. Because you thought war was about technology and tactics. But for humans, war is about survival. And we've been practicing survival for 4 billion years. Stood up and extended his hand, too. The gesture was apparently a human custom for concluding agreements. Welcome to the Commonwealth, Admiral. I think you're going to like what we build together. As shook the human's hand, he heard a sound that chilled him to his core. From somewhere in the building came the sound of human laughter, not cruel or mocking, but genuine and warm. They had destroyed a 3,000-year-old empire in 12 months, and they were laughing about something. He realized that this was what truly made humans dangerous. They didn't conquer out of hatred or fear. They did it because they thought it was the right thing to do, and that made them the most terrifying force in the galaxy. Outside the window, ships from a dozen different species worked together to build something new. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of humanity had begun.